Cover 3 Tailgate. And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Danny Cannell. That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and everywhere you get your podcasts on demand. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like, and come and join us in the chat, a.k.a. the Cover 3 Tailgate, where Garrett jumped in at 10:15 a.m. and said, just here to say I stand with Tom on his old man take about NBA arenas pumping too much music and noise into the games. And we had some professional sporting event attendees here amongst ours. But Tom, is this something you've noticed recently?
I think I noticed it simply because I haven't really been watching much NBA at all this year, and I hadn't been watching the playoffs. And when I flipped to a game the other night during the intermission of whatever hockey game I was watching, and it was in Houston, and it's like you notice it was just non-stop, like during play. Like I know sports play music and all that stuff, like when there's breaks in the action, but like it's like I never really dawned on me that the NBA games at some arenas particularly just do it throughout the entire game. It's like let the crowd be the atmosphere. Like let them be the chorus. I don't need to hear the dun, 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 the entire freaking game. Yeah, it's annoying as hell.
It's kind of like it's like an and one mixtape tour with some of the music. I mean, all they're missing is like the big guy that's on the mic, like talking everybody up, like Mike Chocolate over there with the ball in his hands. Like that's all we need to go full throttle. It used to be very much like there were times for music and there was time for basketball, and that line has been blurred where it's just nonstop noise.
What was the walk-up music I know you were at Marlins Dodgers last night. What was the walk-up music like?
It was solid. I was explaining to my girl, so like, ooh, I like this guy based on his walk-up music. But I did have an etiquette question for you because I'm a big purveyor of the unwritten rules of baseball. Like you have to live by them. This is not anything that happened on the field. This is off the field. Now, this kind of goes into more fan etiquette. So first inning, we're running kind of close. We run to our seats to see Shohei. Leads off the game. So we see Shohei Ohtani. He's playing against the Marlins. We see him strike out. First inning goes by, and then my daughters are like, we're hungry. We're hungry. So we go out, get some food, come back to our seats, and we're eating. So I have a smash burger with fries, pretty big tray with ketchup. They got chicken tenders, fries, ketchup, like a lot of food in our laps and stuff. So we're sitting there, and we're in we have good seats, and they're perfect for left-handed batters, foul ball territory. Like we're right there. So Michael Conforto's up the plate, lefty, fouls one off. My daughters are kind of like, I'm just happy they're not on their phones. They're kind of eating. I have a tray that's pretty big. Like I'll use my Theragun here. Tray like this and then smash burger in the other hand because I'm dipping a little ketchup right here. So it's one of those foul balls that goes up and it like hits the TV booth and then ricochets down right to you. But I'm all over it because I've been to baseball games. So I turn around, tray in the hand, and the ball's coming like right back to us.
Come on.
Spinning, like comes down. So I grab it kind of with my right hand, but it was spinning a lot and kind of caught me by surprise. So it ricochets off my hand, drops like right behind our seat, and I go to get it. And lo and behold, the guy sitting right behind me snatches it right from me. Now I have a 12-year-old daughter with me who was looking for that ball. Probably would have made her day if she would have had a foul ball. The guy never offered. Never said anything. Just he held up the ball like he got it. He was like, it's my ball. Ketchup's everywhere. My daughter spilled ketchup on her jeans. I thought it was fan etiquette. If there is a kid in your vicinity that you give, or at least offer. There was not even an offer. That's what probably bothered me the most. I probably would have said, nah, you keep it. But I thought it was fan etiquette. If you are over, if you're an adult, if there's a kid at a baseball game and you catch a foul ball, I feel like it should go to the kid. Am I wrong on this or am I right?
You're right.
You're right.
I've caught 3 foul balls in my life. I have given them to a kid near me every single time.
Yes. There you go. You know what? And that's
right
the
behind
guy,
me. Yeah, it's right behind me. I took a little. I was like, hey, you got the ball. He held it up, and then nothing, nothing, just right there. Now he was probably in his late 20s, early 30s, so I was giving him maybe a little bit of a pass for that. But I just thought it was etiquette. Give it to the kid.
Okay.
I'm glad I'm not
I'm
the
just
only one
shocked
on
there were
this
people
one.
at the game. Marlins games usually don't have that many people there.
You did say he's wearing a Dodgers hat.
Yeah,
Oh,
the Dodgers
true,
were in
true.
town. Yeah.
Well,
That's
that's
crowded.
what you should have led with. A Dodgers fan? What else would you expect?
So before we print that guy's face out and plaster it all over the park, just as
I
somebody
thought
who's
about it.
most
I was going to
wanted,
dox him. I was going to
He
put it
might-
on X.
he might have kids,
Then why aren't they there with him?
7 o'clock. Is it 7
Bad
o'clock
dad.
first pitch or 6:40 first pitch, right?
I don't know.
40.
I don't know. If I've got young kids and I'm going to the baseball game and I'm a good father like Danny Cannell, I'm taking them with me.
No arguments here. I
Nope.
had the boys at the Durham Bulls game this weekend.
That's
so
right.
That was head on a swivel. I was not expecting them to be ready for a foul ball. I was, sitting there down the first base line. Definitely got to pay attention to all that stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm
yeah,
glad I'm not alone on this.
Yeah, you are not alone. It is always hand it to the closest child who's going to enjoy it and take it home. If you want to jump in front of a kid for a t-shirt cannon, that's probably an XL t-shirt. Okay, kid can't be able to wear that thing anyway. But foul balls, I think, absolutely have to go to the child. Very fired up because those of you who have been paying close attention to the feed are already shooting off fireworks because while school's out for the summer school is in now. Summer school off and running, Bud. I know it feels good to see some of the feedback. I mean, we started with the reigning national champions with our good friend Dave Biddle with a team that is going to draw a ton of interest and has already gotten reaction. How are we feeling now that summer school is in session?
Feeling great. We had Dave on Monday with Ohio State, had Jordan Hill on for Georgia. So two teams with new or newish quarterbacks there, and talking to Dave like, all right, how confident are you that Sayan's going to be good and win, right? Like when is he going to be good? And talk to Jordan a lot about like, hey, you have in theory at least some real weapons on the outside for Georgia this year. Like, how big is the drop off from Beck, like good Beck, to Stockton, and do we actually think that'll show up in the numbers? Maybe some kind of inside info on maybe some new starters to look out for, especially if you're playing college fantasy, and obviously a lot of talk about defense as well.
That's awesome. So those we've already got Ohio State out. We've already got Georgia out. Oregon coming up on Friday. So nothing but heavy hitters here at the beginning.
Matt got up at 4 a.m. his time to do that, by the way.
Matt did?
Matt, yeah. So I texted him. I was like, hey, bro, you're in Oregon. This is a 7 a.m. record. He's like, yeah, got stuff to do, man. I love doing summer school. Let's get it done.
Dude.
Let's go.
Love our experts, 24/7 Sports Network, all across, Matt Preem there for Duck Territory, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Duck Territory. They do a fantastic job. He does a fantastic job. Keep your eyes out. That summer school will continue to roll on here on the Cover 3 podcast feed. All right, a little bit of news to get to before the business of the day, which is taking a look back at year one for the last off season's coaching hires, and it begins with just dust it off, and we still have not escaped news tied to Michigan and Connor Stallions, and another season will start with a Michigan coach having to pick and choose a suspension, self-imposed, of course, but this self-imposed suspension conveniently going to be for games number 3 and games number 4 for Sherrone Moore in advance of the extracurricular scouting penalties, the war that they are fighting with the NCAA. Tom, I know you wrote about this for CBSSports.com. Central Michigan and Nebraska will not face Sherrone Moore, but New Mexico and Oklahoma will. Okay, what do we mean? What do we make? What do we take away from this suspension?
My biggest takeaway was one they wouldn't let me write.
They didn't let you write the thing about Nebraska?
No, I put a joke in the column about it, but like if you're Nebraska, how do you feel about that? Like Michigan cares so much about this that they're just picking and choosing which games to suspend him for, and they're like, we don't need him for the Nebraska game. So
Central, you're on the same level as Central Michigan.
Yeah.
New Mexico needs Sherrone Moore, but at Nebraska in Lincoln doesn't.
Yeah.
You thought you were on the way back.
I know. Like
Come
you
on.
sit there, you fancy yourself like a national title contending program, but the team that actually won the national title 2 years ago is like, we don't need our coach for that game. But I wrote, and I've become the main character on Ohio State Twitter because of it. I just hope this is the end of it because I don't care anymore. Like everybody that was involved with this is gone. Like they won the national title. Harbaugh's gone. He's got a 4-year show cause. This is like the 5th suspension that they've had in the last 2 seasons of their or 3 seasons now of their head coaches. They clearly care so much that they're like, yeah, we'll suspend him for 2 games, but not these games. So it's like Michigan's just trying to appease the NCAA to just, okay, here we go. Can we freaking move on? And I just feel like the NCAA has far bigger fish to fry right now. Like the future of your sport, like maybe spend more time trying to figure out how to navigate the current waters you find yourself in than spending any more time trying to find a way to punish Michigan for something that happened a few years ago. And that really pissed off a lot of Ohio State fans.
Why?
Because 15 years ago, Chip, when you and I were just bloggers and our job was to aggregate, Sports Illustrated released a story about Jim Tressel, and the tattoo gate, which was one of the dumbest controversies of all time. And it was a 4,000-word story. And our job at the time was to take those 4,000-word stories and turn them into 500-word stories so people didn't have to read the whole thing. So I aggregated that Sports Illustrated story, and Ohio State fans, the ones that spend their time on QAnon and then took a couple times to go over to Bucknuts or 11 Warriors, they found a screenshot of that, which was aggregated by another site, which wasn't even my article, but it references my article, which was aggregating the actual article from Sports Illustrated and said, as Tom Fornelli wrote for CBSSports.com. And Ohio State fans turned that into, well, then why did you care so much about Jim Tressel? It's like, I didn't say anything about it. I thought it was stupid at the time, too. I've never, like, anybody who watches this show or listens to this show has a pretty good sense of how I feel about the NCAA and these penalties. So, yeah, Ohio State fans have been very, very, very mad at me the last few days.
Boys,
For no reason. This whole thing is so dumb.
Yes.
Like, it's really stupid. It perfectly summarizes how dysfunctional our sport is and the legislating body that tries to, wield its power. It feels like, is this the swan song for the NCAA? Like, is this their last hurrah that on June 6th and 7th?
There you go. I was about to say,
and announce this punishment, and they're going to all of a sudden, hey, don't forget about us. It's so dumb. All of it's dumb, though. Michigan, suspending Sherrone Moore for games 3 and 4 is stupid. Like, all of it shows you the dysfunctionality of college football. Like, none of it makes any sense, but it's everything we're all too familiar with. And does anybody care? I just want to move past this. We already had these discussions, how much it helped, how much it didn't help. The Connor Stallion stuff, it's over, it's done. Like Tom said, a lot of people have already moved on. They're in the NFL. The players are in the NFL. The coaches in the NFL. Like, why are we still having to deal with this?
I mean, I was going to say bad news is June 6th and 7th is the court date. And there are people who are getting excited for that like they would the OJ trial.
I mean, they Ohio State fans, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're just like, here comes the hammer. This is when it happens. This will be it. And I imagine, I can't remember exactly, but I imagine that there will be media covering that June 6th and 7th infractions case.
You think?
Imagine if we didn't have summer school. We would get how many episodes out of it?
Do you think they will? Do you think Pete Sam will be there at the courthouse? I don't know if anybody cares. You do.
I think, yeah. And I saw somebody make a comment like, oh boy, I wish they could put cameras in there for this one. And it's because
where is this being heard?
It's in Indianapolis, right?
Oh yeah. They'll send people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because Michigan has been defiant, right? At a lot of these turns. And so now it's become, remember, it's not about the cheeseburger. So the NCAA versus Michigan is kind of what I see this as. And I too find it very stupid and very dumb, but I don't think we're free of it yet with this news.
I mean, it must be bad. You've seen the conspiracy theorists when the president is leaving. Santa Ono is going to Florida. He's getting out ahead of it before the hammer comes down. That's the other theory.
I know.
Do you know how many people move from Michigan to Florida every year? Are we sure we want to read into this?
Probably for a pay raise.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a very interesting explanation of that offered to me that I hadn't really thought about, but there are a lot of places in universities across America right now where they are looking at sort of like the political infighting that's happening in their state or on their boards. And they're like, I don't want to do this. I'm out. And Michigan is a real hotbed, big spotlight on everything going on there. He might not only be dodging the hammer from the NCAA. He might be getting out of town. I don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm gonna go somewhere else.
Mhm.
And
I
Florida,
think that's far more likely. Yes.
yeah. So it's something that I think is probably a bigger factor than necessarily an NCAA punishment. All right, one more note here. Notre Dame and Clemson announced a 12-year annual series coming up that I guess the series is set to begin in 2027. They were already scheduled across these 12 years for 6 matchups. However, there are other years where they were not scheduled to play that now are going to become part of this new rivalry. Number one, Bud, you got any nicknames for this rivalry? And then number two, do we have any other big picture takeaways from this?
Get back to me on the nicknames. We may be able to figure something out there. Big picture, remember they have the whole TV ratings bonus now for the ACC. I think this is really smart on Clemson's part to go ahead and do this. Remember, it's still part of the ACC deal for now, as I read it. And it was like they already play every couple of years. Now they're just not going to wait every couple of years. They're going to go ahead and do it. So, like, to me, that makes a lot of sense.
Florida State, if I'm Michael Alford, I'm picking up the phone, or I'm kicking myself. I didn't set this up first. Same thing at Miami for Dan Radakovich. Like the other programs that were supposed to be a part of this scheduling, I'll be curious to see, hoping, fingers crossed, that maybe Florida State can get a similar agreement. Miami too. I think it's all better. Bud, you nailed it, though. The genius of this is that this will be a ratings bonanza, between these two games. And if they're considering those, good on Clemson for setting this up. And so the way it unfolded, the years that they're on the ACC loop where they're supposed to play anyway, it will count as an ACC game. But the years that they weren't in the loop, that will not be an ACC game, right?
Ongoing issue was the way that Ross reported it, because the initial reporting, let me get out like a pocket protector here, but I reached out to Notre Dame for comment and clarity on the issue. I have not heard back. CBS Sports has reached out for comment. We are awaiting that. But
I thought the best takeaway was yours, Chip.
What,
you wrote a column on it, and unlike you, I read your column.
I read your
column.
I
thought it was a very good column, and I think that you should share your viewpoint of what this is.
Notre Dame has the best deal in sports. Notre Dame is never going to join a conference. Mm-hmm. Notre Dame has always said the only thing that will drive us to a conference is if we have trouble with our schedule, if we have trouble putting together a competitive schedule, and if we have trouble getting access to the 12-team playoff. If they're going to put together scheduling agreements with Clemson and Florida State and Miami, then they are building out, along with their traditional rivalries, a competitive schedule for the next decade plus. If the 14 or 16-team playoff proposals get adopted, then Notre Dame has access to the playoff almost every single season. All they got to do is be a top 14 team. Do you know in the last 10 seasons, Notre Dame has finished outside of the top 14 just twice? And one of those was 2022 is an 18th place finish. I mean, Notre Dame has to wake up, tie their shoes, and not trip over their feet on the way out the door, and they are likely going to be a college football playoff contender for the next 10 plus years. There is no reason for Notre Dame to ever be able to do this. And to your point, Danny, if this does end up being a situation where Notre Dame is able to count the non-rotational years as part of their 5, then they are kicking out NC State games, they are kicking out Virginia games, they are kicking out Wake Forest games, and they are replacing them with more valuable and more competitive games. Again, the ACC is holding firm on their line that the other years don't count. If Ross says it's an ongoing issue and the first version of the report says the ACC rotation will need to be tweaked, it sounds like between now and 2029, there's going to be more conversations between those two. But that would be truly the most VIP experience if Notre Dame gets to pick and choose its 5 ACC games every single year, and also be able to build out this competitive schedule and compete for the college football playoff. I mean, it is remarkable the way that this sport continues to cater to Notre Dame.
And it's a safe bet to say that Notre Dame will end up winning that tug of war with the ACC, because the ACC just kind of caved to Florida State, Clemson, and Miami. Why? Because they need them more than they need the ACC. And guess what? The ACC needs Notre Dame far more than Notre Dame needs the ACC. So, yeah, Notre Dame's going to end up winning that in the long run.
And it benefits the ACC to have Notre Dame against Miami in Hard Rock Stadium more than it does sending Notre Dame, all respect, but to Winston-Salem to go play Wake Forest. You know, like those are just going to be like very different games as they continue to do it. When the Florida State Clemson settlement went through, remember it was widely reported, and we're also going to work on getting Notre Dame to play against our biggest brands more often. Now we get to find out whether Notre Dame is going to be able to really put together this in a way that totally favors them, or whether this is just going to be extra beyond the 5. So it was a big day in Notre Dame Clemson ACC future. So it was a good one. All right. Anything else before we hit a break and jump into this? Nope. All right. Coming up on the other side, Kalen DeBoer, Mike Elko, Jeff Lebby, Kurt Signetti, Sherrone Moore, Jonathan Smith, Deshaun Foster, Jed Fish, Manny Diaz, Fran Brown. Did you meet expectations? What is the outlook for 2025? We'll go through reviewing year one hires, year one for last year's hires, and more next.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more. It's Gareth Bale! Ronaldo! Wonderful goal! On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast. You know, sometimes we like to check in after year 3. Sometimes we like to check in after year 4. A lot of coaches don't even make it to year 4. So as we prepare for year 2 for last year's coaching hires, I want to run through and just ask some simple questions. Did you meet expectations? And what is the outlook moving forward? Bud Elliott, do you think that Kalen DeBoer, falling short of the college football playoff, but very much being in the mix, you know, right on that cut line, do you think Kalen DeBoer met expectations in year 1 in Tuscaloosa?
No.
Yeah.
Definitely not. I don't know that my opinion of him as a coach has changed materially, but he definitely missed expectations. Like nobody at Alabama thought we were going to miss the 12-team playoff. And when you laid a total egg against Oklahoma and got embarrassed, you lost to Vanderbilt. Like, no, you didn't meet expectations. And you definitely didn't meet the expectations of most Bama fans. I don't think you met reasonable expectations. There's no way.
Agreed. I mean, it's a very high bar to clear. Like, I think that every reasonable Alabama fan understood that they probably weren't going to win a national title right away after losing Nick Saban in the first year of Kalen DeBoer. And there were a lot of changes, and you thought there would be some bumps. But I still think that at the end of the day, you were like, well, we'll be in the playoff. We'll be competing for the SEC. And you didn't really do either of those things.
I'm probably not as harsh because I think my expectations were pretty low going into the season. Like, I thought if you would have said 9 wins, I would have said, all right, that's not awful. I get like the backlash, but the losses and who they came to, I think are what makes it below the expectations, right? 9-3 in a, all by itself isn't that bad, but losing to Vanderbilt for the first time in forever, getting, beat down by a very average Oklahoma team, that's what makes it disappointing. Not to mention, an ugly bowl loss.
I think that matters when we're talking about perception and fan feeling. Like Bud's, like not changing the way that we, analyze Kalen DeBoer, but that was an awful showing in the bowl game against Michigan. And so to have that after a bunch of other eggs that you had laid coming down the stretch, not great. But what about that second part? No, Bud says no concern. Danny, you think they're good to be able to meet expectations and or exceed them this year?
I do. I think they're going to have different, more consistent quarterback play. Like, they're going to lose the dynamic running aspect of Jalen Milroe, but I think whoever wins that job, whether it's Ty Simpson or somebody else, I think the addition of Ryan Grubb, him coming back to pair with Kalen DeBoer for the offensive, attack, I think that'll bring more stability. I think there was it's hard when you go from one culture to another culture that is entirely different. And I think some of the players probably took advantage of them, and it was a little bit painful, and that's probably why they lost to Vanderbilt right after they, have one of the seasons. So I think that probably had a lot to do with it. So I think that that kind of shock to the system will be a little bit smoother this year, where everybody kind of knows what's expected of them, and it doesn't have to be, a negative thing that it's different than Nick Saban.
Beating Georgia didn't count for anything because of what happened after.
Yeah, pretty much.
That should have been the capital S signature win, and just was not able to follow that up. All right, let's keep it in the SEC. Tom, you think Mike Elko? How do we grade? How do we rate or look at Mike Elko's first year at Texas A&M?
I would say you lived up to expectations. I think that if you're Texas A&M, obviously we know what the goal is. What they've spent money on over, however the last few years, how much they gave Jimbo Fisher. Like 8-5 as a record is not exactly going to be good enough going forward. But in the first year, like you looked at how the season went, if you break it down, they were what? They started 8-2. They were in the playoff hunt. They were in the running for it, and then they kind of fell apart at the end. They had the 4 overtime loss to Auburn, which was not a game that they should lose, but, that happens. You lose to Texas, which was, not a very good performance. Like your offense sucked in that game, and then you lose the bowl game. So you go from 8-2 to 8-5. So you leave the season with a sour taste in your mouth, but I think overall it was a good season for Texas A&M. You lost early in the year to Notre Dame. That team went on to reach the title game. So it's not like that was a bad loss. That was a good loss. Your other loss was to South Carolina, which was another good team. Outside of that Auburn game, there really weren't any games you could look at and say, wow, we played well below our expectations for what this team should be doing. So I would say he met expectations, but I suggest winning more than 8 games this year,
though. I kind of feel like he's just not Jimbo, so the fans are all about him.
That's part of it, yes.
Yeah.
Like less embarrassing moments. It felt like the team played hard for them, but they do lose a lot off that team, and they're putting a lot of eggs into the Marcel Reed basket. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, if they take a step back this year record-wise, which they could, certainly, are fans still there? Because I think Elko's a good coach, right? I think he gets the most out of his teams for the most part. That's a hard league to win. And like, how much more are you expecting? They're probably expecting a whole lot more, but it's not like they went out and just crushed the portal. They lost their leading receiver to Georgia. I think he's like a good, competent coach, and like definitely a reset over what they had with the craziness that was the Jimbo era. But I don't. It's kind of hard to gauge. I don't know. We're doing Texas A&M, I think tonight actually for summer school. So if we had done the show tomorrow, I would give you a better read on what the exact fan base vibe is.
So I think kind of the opposite of Kalen DeBoer. I had higher expectations for Elko. I bought in fully before the South Carolina game, and
they got dog walked in that game.
They got dog walked. I thought that was probably the disappointing. So like quickly, I after they beat LSU, I was all in. I was like, the Marcel Reed switch was it. You saw flashes against Florida. So I was like, man, this team's the best team in Texas. I still thought they could have played better against Texas. The offense, I guess, would say the thing that disappointed me, and that's what concerns me going forward, is I was all in on Marcel Reed. And like Bud said, I think Texas A&M is too, and that makes me a little bit nervous based on how he played down the stretch.
Still a high floor.
Yeah.
Right? To me, that's the Texas A&M. The team is too talented. I have too much belief in Mike Elko that it does seem as though we've got your Texas 8-4. You've got like a 7-5 kind of floor. But if you're going to talk about any kind of steps forward, if you're going to talk about being in the hunt deeper, then it does require Marcel Reed to show us things he didn't show us last year. And look, Marcel Reed was thrown into the fire.
Right.
If you were thinking about the development of Marcel Reed, you probably were hoping Connor Wegman was your quarterback all last season. Maybe you sprinkle some Reed in and then Reed takes over. But, we'll see if he grew from those experiences. I think it is the simplest answer is to point to the quarterback to talk about a team ceiling, but for Texas A&M in particular, it does feel super appropriate. What about Mississippi State? How do you judge Mississippi, like success for Jeff Lebby in year 2?
Failure to meet expectations.
Really?
Let's play a game. Who were the 2 teams Mississippi State beat last year?
Is it Arizona?
No.
Oh.
It was.
They only had 2.
Oh, the mute button won again.
Oh man, come on.
Found them.
They lost to what? Toledo at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
They lost to Arizona State.
Yeah, they beat Eastern Kentucky and UMass.
Yeah,
those were their 2 wins. They lost to Toledo at home. They lost to Arizona State, which, hey, Arizona State went on to win the Big 12, got to the playoff. Not a bad loss in the hindsight, but still, they went 0-8 in SEC play, and they lost by 18 points per game in conference play. They just weren't competitive.
And I genuinely think teams stopped trying against them.
Oh, because of pace and play calling. I was talking.
Yeah, how do I say this in a way that I think there was a little wink, wink, nod, nod. Like, hey, Mississippi State is an all-out Bryles tempo team that just all of a sudden is not running that in some of these games. And I think, like, look at the Texas game, okay? They all of a sudden dialed down the tempo a ton. Texas is like, hey, man, I see you. Cool. Like, we're not sending guys home from third base. We're going to just, run the ball, get out of here. Like, we'll cover, but, like, not by a million. Like, you guys don't have an SEC roster, and we don't need to, run 90 plays and get our starters hurt. So I actually think they were like legitimately a lot worse than their advanced metrics showed. Mm-hmm. I think the Georgia game showed that too. I think that Mississippi State actually showed good fight against A&M. I think A&M saw those prior games like, this team is garbage. And I mean, they were kind of right, but like, I think A&M had to kind of turn it on later in the game, because A&M kind of played that game like they were a Texas or a Georgia, and they weren't really that level of team. So, I mean, guys, their over-under is 3.5.
Mm.
What did Jeff Lebby get guaranteed money for taking this job?
I
mean, like, that's kind of the real question here, right? Like, I mean,
I think they should send a thank you card to Ryan Walters and Purdue, because if not for the Boilermakers last year, Mississippi State was the worst Power 4 team in the country.
Mm. And that's what is it, LSU versus FAR put in the chat, is Jeff Lebby on the Ryan Walters track? He might be.
Maybe. Yeah. Depending on what's available and who wants the gig.
Well, I mean, like, you got to make them bleed, right? I mean, somebody said, like, what is a step forward for Mississippi State? It's like, just make your opponent sweat, just like create some discomfort. And it wasn't I don't know what else Mississippi State can do. Right? I would love to
take the loss. That's, I mean, they don't get Kentucky every year on an annual basis anymore. So that was their kind of not easy win, but easier game against the East.
Like the closest thing to a coin flip that they were going to get.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at their 2025 schedule, and you've got Arizona State again, at least that's at home this time. Like, your non-con is at Southern Miss, Alcorn State, Northern Illinois. He lost to Toledo. So, like, I think they're going to beat Southern Miss, and I think they will beat Alcorn State. I can't guarantee they'll beat Northern Illinois.
Blake Shapen still in the league. He'll be leading that offense again.
I mean, he's going to walk with like $15 million guaranteed before taxes.
And living in Starkville.
Probably it's
overhead.
A lot.
Yeah, I mean, so like, it's a great deal for Jeff Lebby. That was an extremely hard job to take over. I don't really think anybody would have succeeded there. I'm not like closing the door on this chapter quite yet, but I mean, their win total is 3.5.
But it's such an opportunity. Like, I think if you're a Mississippi State fan, you look at the success that Dan Mullen had and Mike Leach had. Those are great coaches. I think that's what you want. That's what you need to have. Somebody has a great mind with an offense that can really exploit things, and you try to get a defense that plays hard and maybe creates a few turnovers. But it is a tough place to win.
They've had so many like things that, like, with Leach, which Leach's death, that has a huge effect on the program and the trajectory, because the way things were going, you were thinking with Mike Leach, well, we're going to be fine for a while. We might not be winning the SEC. We might not get to the playoff, but we're going to have a solid program. So his death just kind of throws everything like out the window, and now you're just kind of scrambling.
Also, that's probably the program in the SEC that has been the most negatively impacted by NIL.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, explain.
I just
The
think
money.
they're broken.
They don't have any.
They don't have
They
it.
don't have any. Okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't like there was a big booster
So,
who left.
even if
Nathan Walker's
you
broke. He's
identify
not
well
supporting
now,
the team.
like if they had a lot of players who other teams wanted to take, they're going to lose some. I think they have enough to keep. Now, granted, this is good and bad. They don't have many guys who other teams want on that roster, right? So they can afford to keep the few that they do have. But if you end up getting good, that means you have more guys that other teams would want. And that's where I have my doubts they can actually hold on to that many guys if you're bidding against other teams in the league. Also like Mississippi State's a prime candidate to get plucked by like a Miami, a Florida State, a Clemson, if Clemson wants to get in the game, Ohio State, like your bigger non-SEC teams as well.
Before we hit a break and turn our attention to the Big Ten, where we will get into Curt Cignetti, I think it's obvious about the expectations, but what is the outlook moving ahead and much more. At 9:03 a.m. Eastern time, our friend Coach K33 said, assuming all NIL is equal, which isn't reality, but it's a nice hypothetical, which of these year two coaches would you want to lead your team? We've already discussed Kalen DeBoer, Mike Elko, Jeff Lebby. We got a couple more, or maybe if there's an off-the-board hire you want to point to. If NIL is equal, which of these hires would you want to lead your university?
Kalen DeBoer.
Yeah. Like he's won everywhere he's been.
Hasn't Cignetti?
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Yep.
But
I might take him. I was going to say DeBoer, but I might take Cignetti just because of what he did with less, in year one. But
It also, what type of program you're at kind of matters here.
For sure.
Now, DeBoer has done it at places with expectations and without. Cignetti has done it only at places without expectations. And they're both pretty decent turnaround artists.
I think that you better have a roster that's ready for Curt Cignetti. That man is death metal. He is. Yeah. It seems like Kalen DeBoer is more of a style that can blend in lots of different places, but Curt Cignetti, you're rolling by Sig's tone, or else you're hitting the streets.
Also, yeah, and that doesn't always work with the most elite of players.
We'll see. And I would say that those are the only other one. Somebody mentioned Elko. I'm gonna say TBD. I mean, Elko's awesome, but both of those head coaches, even if it has not been at the power conference level, both DeBoer and Cignetti have a longer track record as a head coach, and we're talking about leading your team. So Elko on the path to that discussion. But Coach K33, we appreciate you jumping in the chat a couple hours before we get going. Coming up on the other side, we turn our attention to the year one coaches from the last hiring cycle in the Big Ten. We got a couple. What's the outlook moving forward? And more next.
Get ready.
Wait a second. I thought we were going tubing.
All three Sonic the Hedgehog movies and Knuckles are now streaming on Paramount Plus.
And everyone loves it.
Every adventure,
Just try to keep up.
every face-off,
This ends now.
and every moment that will have you saying,
Where have you been? My entire life!
It's showtime.
all three Sonic the Hedgehog movies and the entire Sonic universe are now streaming on Paramount Plus.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, reviewing year one for last offseason's hires, and we turn our attention to the Big Ten, where it's very obvious that Curt Cignetti exceeded expectations, getting the Hoosiers all the way to the college football playoff. But Danny, what do you think the outlook is moving forward? Like, what does the encore look like for Indiana?
I think an encore, if you're at 7 or 8 wins, I think that's a huge success. It's hard to be disappointed considering the history of that school and where they've been. I actually think they might get an upgrade at quarterback with Fernando Mendoza coming in. I thought, Curtis Warwick was a little bit more of a statue and he had a really nice career there, but I do think you could get a little bit more upside about Mendoza.
Yeah, he
But now
just
they're
needs
kind of-
ligaments. He just needs to have ligaments in his knees, that are healthy. As we found
Yes.
out, Curtis Rourke was dealing with knee injury all
Curtis
season.
Rourke disrespect. I will not stand for.
Oh, all right. I think you'll give you. We'll go up. We'll table that conversation for another day. Now you're on everybody's radars, and I don't want to say you snuck up on everybody because at one point, like everybody was aware of how good you are, especially when you started playing some of your better opponents. But I would expect this team to be at the middle to the middle upper tier. Does that make sense? Like they're not in the top 4. They're probably just out of it. And they're probably just below, but that's a great spot to be if you're Indiana, especially where you've been historically.
I mean, obviously they exceeded expectations. It's going to be so hard for them to do that again this year. Like if I'm an Indiana fan, I'm hoping for 8-4 is like my dream outcome, just simply because you far exceeded what you should have done last year based on expectations going into the year. You hit a bunch of home runs in the transfer portal. Now you've been back in the portal and you're kind of rebuilding your roster again, which we know kind of a, lotto machine there. You hit some, you lose some. But also, let's not forget last year's schedule. Pretty conducive to winning football games. This year, not so much. Like the non-con is still relatively simple and clean. Old Dominion, Kennesaw, Indiana. Then you've got Illinois, which is coming off a 10-win season and gets everybody back. You're going on the road to Iowa. You're on the road for Oregon. You're on the road for Penn State. Like you have a far more difficult regular season schedule than what you had to deal with last year. So odds are you're not winning 10, 11 games again. You're just hoping to get to 8.
I mean, completely. Like the guy met expectations.
Oh, exceeded. You can't say met.
Sure, right.
Yeah,
Like
exceeded.
but beyond their wildest dreams, the
100%.
odds that is the best season Indiana ever has is pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
And like even if it falls back to earth, which it likely will somewhat, I think like he can coach there for life.
Another thing to add here, he suffered what happens. His coaching staff starts to get picked apart. So you've got to go you showed up with a huge army of coaches that came from James Madison, of players that came from James Madison, and everybody was all bought in. Now your players are starting to leave to, their eligibility's out. They're going pro. They're getting picked apart by the transfer portal. Your coaches are getting hired away to other places. This will be, this like the not hot take angle to this, but you could make a argument that this year is more important for Indiana football in the Kurt Cignetti era. Because if you just drop back down to 4-8 or 5-7, then you've missed out on the opportunity to capitalize on to that point, the best season since like the 1960s and maybe one of the best seasons ever. But if you're able to have a softer landing spot that is in that sort of 8-win kind of world, then you are redefining what everybody inside that program and around that university is going to expect from Indiana basketball. Indiana football. What a Freudian slip there.
Wow, just insulted them casually without even meaning to. What's interesting? They do have a lot of those James Madison transfers are still there with eligibility.
Multiple year
like
eligibility.
Kamara, the edge rusher was really good. D'Angelo Pons is back. They got a receiver back. Like they do have a lot of guys that are still there that are a piece of this culture. Yeah. But I totally agree. As somebody saw, a team with a lot of success 2 years ago in Florida State completely evaporate and erode the confidence that, people started to think Florida State is back. If you don't at least continue the success, people will quickly the fact that we're even looking at the schedule and be like, yeah, maybe they could win that one is completely different than where you were just 2 years ago. So if they don't back it up, if they are 4-8, then we'll start looking at them the same way that we had historically. So I do think it's critical for them to at least be around that win total of 7 or 8 games.
It is important to mention, they played 2 playoff teams last year. They lost to Ohio State by 23 and they lost to Notre Dame by 10, but that 10-point loss was a little misleading because of late scores. So it's just when you look at their schedule this year, it's hard to imagine. Chip, you mentioned they might go 5-7 and not capitalize on it. I don't think you're saying that's what's going to happen, but as a possibility, it's
sure.
I don't see that happening because, as Danny just mentioned, they're still too talented overall, I think, to lose that many games in the Big Ten. It's going to be very, very difficult against that schedule to get anywhere near where they were.
So, look, I am curious here. if Cincinnati knew that you were going to land Mendoza, like given the draft type Mendoza's getting, does he leave for UCLA?
I don't know. I don't know too much about his thinking to necessarily. Do you think he got a raise going to UCLA?
I don't know, but it's odd. Like who do you think has better job security, like Cignetti or Foster? Now Foster did coach well at the end of the year, I thought, and those guys play hard for him. But still, I mean, one guy just took a deadbeat program to the college football playoff. The other one went 5-7. So it's a little. I don't know. Maybe it was just a promotion, and he was the QB coach now.
Yeah, he was just the co-OC.
Sure.
At Indiana. Now he's the full OC. So it's the promotion. It's the raise.
Show. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And but also, I mean, I don't know. Maybe he wasn't a big Mendoza guy. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, also Tino Sinceri, like football lifer. You know that guy already is picturing his Wikipedia page of having about 24 stops by the time he hangs it up at like age 60. You know, that's some guy that's not afraid to do a little job hopping. He'll stay in the game, and of course he's a big part of that that Nico story. Well, let's go right there since we talked about Deshaun Foster. Bud, would you 5-7? I don't remember what their win total was last year. Maybe
wasn't 5.
Was it 4.5?
They beat their conference win total. I do know that.
Yeah. Right.
At first I was like, oh God, he's in over his head.
Right.
And he was. They had like 9 men on punt team several times against Hawaii in that opener. I was like, this is, and some of the punt and field goal decisions were just atrocious. Like just not correct. Like hitting on 19 against a 6, right? But then it got a lot better. And I think if you're a UCLA fan, given the kind of resources UCLA has right now, I think you have to be fairly happy with the improvement that he showed. And the team didn't quit on him. And in this transfer portal NIL era, I think you got a lot of guys thinking about offseason and next year. And man, they stayed together. They played hard.
They beat Rutgers. They beat Nebraska. They beat Iowa. I mean, those are good conference wins.
Those teams fought. So I think if you're a UCLA fan, you got to be pretty happy. And you got somebody who wants to be there, whereas Chip clearly didn't. So I think you got to be. He probably did meet expectations, yeah. Although it started rocky.
I would think he exceeded them.
Yeah, he exceeded. Yeah. But
I think if you took a pulse of not only like our media, college football media, but even the UCLA fan base, I bet there was some level of panic when he was at Big Ten Media Days and gave the now infamous, we're based in LA. Like that was awkward. It was uncomfortable. And you felt like this guy's completely in over his head. But I think Bud brings up a great point. It's something I always look for. It's like, aside from the records, do you fight? Have you thrown in the towel? And their team kept fighting. They clawed all the way to the finish. So
also, like, Bud's 1,000% right. Like, early in the year, there were some wild coaching decisions. Like opening the year in Hawaii, they won 16-13, but you're watching that game with like your eyebrows kind of like raising above your forehead.
We were texting about it. I was like, guys, I know this is kind of a nothing game, but holy cow.
What are they doing? But
this is wild.
But just looking back, like they started 1-5. Those 5 losses, Indiana playoff team at LSU. It's LSU on the road. Oregon, Big Ten champ, playoff team. Penn State on the road, playoff team. Minnesota, I think they won 8-9 games last year. Like the schedule was tough. Like they were making weird decisions, but they were playing a tough ass schedule early in the year. And then once it eased up, they started beating all the teams that they were supposed to be on a slightly lower tier than or on the same tier. So I think that's a good sign going forward. Whereas it's like, is UCLA going to make the playoff? No. But if they've already shown the ability to beat those other teams in those same tiers in their first year in the league, I think that's a good sign.
Yep. All right, later, Bud. What about Jonathan Smith, Michigan State?
Failure to meet expectations. And I put that more on, you know what? Jonathan Smith met the expectations. I will say Aiden Childs failed to meet my expectations, and Jonathan Smith suffered for it.
But that is a part of, remember when he was hired, he's bringing his guy with him. So either it's a misevaluation or inability to develop him into a quarterback that's not going to just, what was his whoopsie daisy rate? Had to have been up there because he just chucked it a lot of times. It was up there. So I would say I I think if you would have gone 7-5 as opposed to 5-7, that would have been probably where I would have seen them being. So I would say they did not meet expectations.
Was it the end of the Mel? All right. So did Mel finish the 2023 season, or are we on interim
No,
status?
he was the first coach fired.
Okay. And that was in
That's why he's on the carousel graphic, because he was the first one gone.
We actually had somebody to make, because then there was the story about the collective sending emails to players at the end of the 2023 season saying deals up. Sorry, no more deal. I mean, I will give Jonathan Smith a little bit of time to just rebuild a healthy winning culture and environment, because the combination of all those events is pretty toxic. And so I'll give him a pass. But look, Michigan State might not be expecting to get back to where Mark D'Antonio had them for that run where they were winning Big Ten titles, playing in Rose Bowls, and like very much at the top of the conference, because you were benefiting from Michigan being down. You know, you were benefiting from, I guess that would have been Ohio State kind of in transition, right? Like you've got Urban. They win early, but not always being able to be consistent, dropping a game or two a year. But man, it's Michigan State's a place where you should be playing in bowl games every single season. You should be competitive even against the best teams. So Spartans got a little bit more to work on. About Sherrone Moore.
Failure to meet expectations, man. There was a whole, when we started the show talking, but there was a whole lot of stuff going on at Michigan following the national title. You lose a whole bunch of players. You've still got the NCAA stuff looming over you. I still believe that not addressing the quarterback position in the transfer portal was a huge mistake on their part, because I don't want to hammer it over the head, because I understand I said it, and they are human beings, but Michigan had a MAC level quarterback room last year. And the fact that they were able to win as many games as they did, despite putrid quarterback play, tells me that if they had just gone in the portal and got their own version of Curtis Rourke, somebody who is not spectacular, but just a guy who could compete at the Big Ten level, they would have had a much better season. They could have been in the running for a playoff berth. But the fact that they didn't do it, I think, was a huge mistake on Sherrone Moore and that staff's part, and it led to them losing a whole hell of a lot of games.
Maybe it was all by design so they could land Bryce Underwood. Because, I mean, if they're 9-3, do they have, does Larry Ellison's his wife or his girlfriend? Do they chip in the $12 million, to help get him? So maybe, but I agree with what you're saying. It was very similar to Nebraska prior to getting Dylan Raiola. Their quarterback room was awful. And if you just could have gotten average quarterback play, you could have potentially been 10-2 and been right back in the thick of things. So, but I would say my expectation for Sherrone Moore was kind of I think we were all very tepid on it. We'll see. And I think that's why this year coming up is the one where I think the expectation going into this year, you should see much better quarterback play. Because I don't think any of us loved Alex Orji. It was kind of what are they going to do? Play some Wildcat? And maybe, hopefully he develops, and he just didn't. So I think this year is perfect, but I do think there's a lot of reason for optimism. A lot of similar things. The defense still was really nasty, and they had injuries to deal with. They still, I think I think they'll be fine this year. I think what does it determine? Do they make the playoffs? Is how well the quarterback room is once again. But I feel like the defense still feels pretty good. The team plays hard for Sherrone Moore. They like him. So I feel if you're a Michigan fan, the season was salvaged with those last two games.
Without a doubt.
And it's I go back just as my own, being a fan aspect of this, the Illinois game, Illinois played horrible that game. It was a horrible performance. I think not horrible might be a stretch, but it was one of their worst performances of the season. And they won by 14 because Michigan's offense was just that bad.
Coach K33 just asked, can anyone find Sherrone's buyout? Wasn't his contract, which was cemented, signed very late in the game, wasn't it pretty reasonable? Where it was kind of, if this season doesn't go great, there could be an out.
I don't know off the top, but I think
I don't either. But I feel like his salary wasn't something that was crazy and the buyout wasn't crazy. And I think some of that was the fact that he was elevated from Harbaugh. He was kind of the one that made sense where they didn't go
It's
just
very
back
low.
up the truck to somebody.
I mean, that's
According to MGO blog, Moore's buyout is $5 million and goes down to $1 million each season he coaches.
it's
Right.
kind of standard for zero head coaching experience, promote from within contracts. You go win big, you get another deal, another contract extension. Let me kick this one at you. I have almost Billy Napier-like read on Sherrone Moore's future at Michigan, where Napier was tied so much to Lagway that now it's Underwood. And I don't know what Underwood needs to or will show, but having Underwood show something and having Underwood not hit the transfer portal after the season, all those things seem to be a big part of the Sherrone Moore outlook, both in terms of the way people feel about him, but then also Michigan's success. He's an offensive coordinator. You can't go out there and just have a team that is going to try to win every game 19-13, especially if you've got a 5-star number 1 overall prospect. So I'm getting very much like Bryce Underwood might be the key if this season, let's say they lose to Oklahoma. Let's say they lose a Big Ten game that they don't, really deserve to lose or that they shouldn't lose. Might want to break glass in case of emergency if Mikey Keene is your starting quarterback at that point.
Especially because their defense will still be good. I don't know if it will be as good as it has been the last 2 years though.
Yep. What about Jed Fish at Washington? Kind of below the radar.
Very below the radar.
I'd say Met, but I don't think it was a failure or a success. It was just kind of all right. We talked about it, and he got kind of annoyed with me during Big Ten media days when I talked about rebuilding. And he's like, it's not a rebuild, it's a refresh or whatever. It's like, it's a rebuild, buddy. You were pretty much bringing in an entire new roster. Not saying you were, but it was a tough situation because they had a whole new coaching staff, a whole lot of new players, a team coming off of a playoff title game, appearance. But I would say, by and large, you probably wish you had a few games back that you could have won. But I still feel optimistic going into this season because of what they have at quarterback.
Same.
He's pretty special, and I don't think enough of the country is kind of aware of what Desmond Williams could be. I think this could be a year to keep an eye on Washington under the radar.
We did end up giving, not only are they going to be in a position where you played DeMond Williams a lot, right? And now you're just sort of, taking the training wheels off. He's going to be all systems go. And he's got a wide receiver that we talked about in the mock drafts, Denzel Boston, another player who could end up being one of the top wideouts. That should be a lot of fun to watch in Washington. All right. ACC, Manny Diaz, exceed expectations?
Yes.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah.
And I think you got I feel pretty good about him again. I mean, they felt comfortable enough to send Malik Murphy packing. They have some money apparently, to bring in a quality quarterback. So I feel pretty good. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but the ACC, below those top 4 is kind of wide open. Your ham sandwiches, Chip,
right.
would you like to call them? They might have a little extra sauce on them, a little extra meat in there.
They do.
The ACC's 2 tiers. It's got their playoff tier and it's got their Big 12 tier.
The hams, no. And then there's
That
a
is
third
very
tier.
true.
There's a third tier that's a little sad.
Okay, true. Yes, the soggy ham sandwich where it's been sitting in the fridge a little too long.
No, Duke's ham sandwich has some spicy mustard on it. It's got a little bit. Fran Brown, another one exceeding expectations. Though I will say I am adjusting about whether or not where I could see Duke coming back and winning 7-8 games this year after the success of last year. I think Syracuse would be in a good position if they can make it to a bowl game, even after winning 10, given the turnover that they've got right there.
And the schedule.
Yes.
Yeah, it's much different. I will say, going back to Duke for 1 second, I do think that Illinois got to play Duke in non-con this year, and it's at Duke. And I think a lot of Illinois fans are just kind of writing W next to that one in ink. It's I don't know. That game's going to be tougher than you think.
Does a great job of getting that group ready. They've kind of got a little, now this one's one that I'd need to dig into because I think I could. Duke football might have a little OKG to them. They might have a little, we We go find the guys that are gonna fit in here, that are gonna be playing hard, well prepared, doing the small stuff well. Then that's a carryover, I think, from Elko, right? Because Elko always had those boys ready to go. And I think Manny Diaz has done a good job of tapping into that as well.
I'll tell you what, Chip, we talk about OKGs, our kind of guys. You know what an OKG is? It's a guy with an EKG heart. That's right. That's what I'm talking about.
I like that.
You know what they're like? They feel like the East Coast version of what Stanford was when it was David Shaw, and previous to that was Jim Harbaugh. Like, you have to have guys that are high academic, that are buying in. They're there more than NIL, and they play hard, and they can scheme them up because they're smart. Like, that was Mike Elko fed into that. Even Cutcliffe helped, leaned into that. But if you get the right kind of guys, they've proven they can win.
Bill O'Brien.
I would say he met expectations.
Yeah. But I think, and this is unfair to Bill O'Brien, but I think part of it is, it's like, what expectations did any of us truly have for Boston College?
Yeah.
I would say he probably exceeded them a little bit. They got to it. They went 7-6. I mean,
and he also bailed on Castellanos.
Yeah.
Right. And Grayson James looks pretty good.
Pretty good. It was a ballsy, he came in there, made some tough decisions, and it ended up working out. Just two Big 12, before we get out of here, two Big 12 first-year coaches. Neither of them had great seasons. Both went 4-8, though maybe we've got, I don't know, maybe I'm getting over my skis here. So Willie Fritz, 4-8 at Houston. And then, of course, get Brent Brennan, 4-8 at Arizona. Who do you got more? Where are you buying stock going forward?
Willie Fritz. I don't think it's close. I mean, I'm kind of worried about Brent Brennan.
Yeah.
You had Tet McMillan and you had Noah Fafita. Like, you had some return guys that wanted to come back to do something special, and that season fell off the rails. Whereas Willie Fritz, bad situation going into it. Like, he's had a better track record, so I feel better about Houston than I do about Arizona.
Yeah. Like, I'm a bigger Willie Fritz guy, and Arizona, I think, had the higher. I mean, we were talking about Arizona as like a Big 12 title contender in their first year in the conference last year. And when you just throwing all the expectations out, just looking at how things went, like, Arizona beat Houston, which makes it ironic because, they also beat Utah early in the year, which we thought at the time, hey, that's a pretty big win for Arizona.
Oh, yeah.
But Utah went on to be kind of, bad. So it's like, you look at their wins: New Mexico, Northern Arizona, Utah, Houston. There's really no win you can point to if you're an Arizona fan that says, well, at least that makes me feel good about where we're going and what we're doing. And while Houston had a 4-8 season, they did beat Kansas State. So they beat TCU, and both of those were on the road. So at least I feel like there's more proof of concept at Houston right now than there is with Brennan at Arizona. So if I'm a Cougs fan, I'm a little more optimistic than I am if I'm a Cats fan.
Houston averaged 14 points per game in last season.
Yeah, they've got to get that figured out. Yeah.
They had back-to-back goose eggs against conference opponents, like back-to-back Big 12 games where they did not score a single point. Hey, they've got Connor Wegman, right? So we'll see. Maybe that'll be a good adjustment for Wegman. We get to see the best of him. I agree. I think that I'm biased by just being a big Willie Fritz guy, but even through that bias, I think objectively, I'm looking at Houston with probably a little bit more enthusiasm moving forward. Any other, if you want to take it off the board, or any other notable year one coaches you want to shout out?
No, I'm good. Screw all the rest of them.
You're not helping my campaign to make sure.
G5, who cares? Who cares? I mean, honestly, does anybody watching or listening to this show right now really care about the G5? I know I don't. Chip doesn't. Danny doesn't. We don't watch any of the games. We don't care. We don't want to care. We never will care. Just go to get out of our damn way. All right. Stop wasting our time with your.
Oh gosh, you got to cut it off.
$300,000 rosters. Come on, we're playing the big boys now. We want $40 million teams. Losers, get a job.
Hey, listen, Blake Shapen is going for 6 straight years of being on the academic honor roll. All right. We were talking about Blake Shapen in the workroom this morning. I went and looked it up. He made the Big 12 academic honor roll 4 times. made the SEC academic honor roll. We tell these boys to get a job, but Blake Shapen is soaking up the academic opportunities in Waco and Starkville. Okay. High achiever. We appreciate that. All right. So tomorrow, Interactive Thursday. Your questions, our answers. Some of those are going to come from the big old bag of mail. At least one of them is going to come from me, because I'm going to ask this crew what were some of the most impactful moves of the transfer portal spring window. But of course, anything is fair game. Come jump in the tailgate early like so many of our friends do. That'll get us off and rolling. Again, if you leave us a 5-star review and in that review put a mailbag question, we will grab that as well. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernelli. You can follow him at Danny Cannell. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you.